10 after 7. This is the Finance Committee meeting. This is January 18th. I am Joan Ludwig. I will be chairing the meeting tonight as Vanessa is not available. The first thing we have on the agenda tonight is a discussion of the facilities budget. We've had discussions on various other sub-budgets at Finance Committee meetings through the fall. We've had education or curriculum, we've had technology, we've had pupil services. So tonight we're going to discuss finance. Facilities. We're in the Finance Committee meeting, but we're discussing facilities. Okay.
And it is rather confusing. It's great to have Mr. Lester here doing the facilities maintenance budget during finance, but we've had fun trying to remember, okay, which committee are we really talking about? So Bob just said to me a few moments ago, he said, this is going to be a first. I'm going to say more words during finance than he did during operations. So let's be gentle to Bob because it's his first year doing a budget in Upper Dublin, but it's really great. He's learned a lot about the numbers in the areas, and with that, thank you very much for doing this.
Bring up the spreadsheet first. With help from Jen, I've been able to take a look at the past 2 years, 2016, 17, 17, 18, where we expect to be, what our budget numbers have been, and what our expected expenses are. And going through the budget, a lot we're basing off of past practice, past history, what we know that these numbers are historically going to be. And we don't expect much variation through such things as our utilities, supplies. They stay fairly consistent through the years. A little bit of variation with the utilities depending on weather. If we have a hot summer, the high school may cost a little more to run. And if we have a colder winter, all of our buildings are going to be more expensive to run. So we do see those fluctuations, but looking over the past few years, we are fairly consistent with the majority of our numbers. I do have a separate breakout. There are some areas that yes. 18, 19? Oh, hold on. There we are. Right tab. Thank you. Taking a look at the 18-19 budget overall, most areas are staying the same, and overall was looking for a slight increase in numbers, around $200,000, and that's more because of some of our capital equipment replacements. Equipment replacement that is, they are capital in nature, but not necessarily on our capital budget. And some of the other projects that we're looking to do are based on why some of the areas are higher, and I have a better breakout for you on that. Again, utilities make up a large part of our budget, but so do our repairs and maintenance and supplies that we are going to need. This time around, not only did I did look at our past history, but I also spent time with each of the principals to see what the needs are of the buildings, and some of the numbers are factored in here, and I'll go into some of those more in depth. So get down to the bottom line here. More numbers in here than I remember. Getting close. This year our budget was just over $3 million, $3,058,000. So far what we're estimating with help of Jen, the estimated spending is going to be around $2.9 million. Next year we're looking at 2.88 as our preliminary number, which is just a 7.52 increase. But we are lumping some more projects into these numbers, which I can go over. Some of the notable budget considerations that we have, starting with maintenance and grounds. What we have, maintenance and grounds, some of the numbers went up for our professional help and supply material, but we're looking to continue regrading fields. This year we were able to regrade 2 softball fields where the infield dirt starts to drop below the grass lines and gives a place for the ball to bounce around. So we're going to do that for the baseball fields now at the high school. Some of the capital equipment items we're looking to do: new zero-turn mower, increase some of our efficiency for cutting around. So we have our larger mowers for the fields, but we need some newer, smaller mowers that we were using on the islands, in and out of the tree areas, and some smaller spaces where larger equipment doesn't necessarily fit. We also have aging snow removal equipment that we need to take care of. Some of our plows are quite old. They're going to get us through this year, but I wouldn't want to count on them next year. This current year, also we obsoleted an old trailer where the frame of the trailer was rusted beyond what we could safely inspect, and the repair costs were in the same area as a new trailer, so we plan on that. But also last month at operations, I discussed some of our ash trees. We do have some money for services to start removing some more of our ash trees, the ones that have been identified as diseased by the ash borer and are in poor condition that will need to be removed. Also, part of this budget, the accessory building. We have some money set aside to assist with the demolition and replacement of this building, some of the professional services that will go along with that. This is the building that we did reject the bid on, because the roof replacement of the building was exceeding the cost of what we think we can have a new storage building. And so we do have money set aside for that. Yeah. I started at the wrong page. Starting from the beginning again, Fort Washington Elementary worked with Sean McAleer with some of his needs, and the main stage curtain came up. We've already had a CoStar's contractor at Starlight Productions, which provides a lot of our services and equipment for the high school. They are CoStar's contractor, and so we do have a good estimate for a new curtain. It's going to be approximately $10,000, and that'll include inspection of all the rigging that goes along with hanging curtain, and they will check all of our lighting rigging while they're out here. Have money set aside, approximately $50,000 for professional design services for a capital project. If we're planning on doing the windows in our capital budget for 1920 capital budget, we need to start this summer on design. We are going to need professional design services to get bids and specs together so we can put something out to bid January, February of 2019. So we do have money set aside. And another addition to the budget, water conditioning operations. As you know, we purchased the water conditioning systems for the high school and Fort Washington Elementary School. It's a very detailed operation where we do need to have a licensed DEP operator for our system. They'll be on site about once a month. Our staff will be handling daily numbers, but this person does need to make reports to the DEP. He will be our licensed operator and out once a month checking everything over. So we do have to pick up his fees, but we also need to take into account our neutralization treatment chemicals. Right now, for anybody who's not familiar, our pH is slightly low, so our water is slightly acidic. Not terribly, but enough that it's disrupting copper on the pipes at the high school. And we did detect lead at one sink at Fort Washington. Levels were not terrible, but it was enough that we should be taking action, and this was the action that we had taken. So we do have the pH neutralizer, which will stop that reaction taking place, and then inhibitors they put into the system, which actually recoat the pipes. So anything that was, any particles that were being removed will be filled in by the inhibitors. Jarett Elementary was the same situation with the stage curtain, not as bad as Fort Washington's, but it is in need of replacement. So we do have money set aside for that in this budget. Also, paving repairs were identified by Meg. Some of the playground areas for the playground for the kindergarten, first, and second graders We're developing some cracks in the playground, and some of the mats, the protection mats under the equipment, we're separating away from the paving, so we need to fill that area in. We do need to air condition one of the offices. The office that has the copy machine and all the paper supplies does not have any ventilation at all. It was a room that was converted into an office, so we do need to take care of ventilation for that. Main office carpet replacement at Jarretttown. And the PTA has brought up they're looking to do an outdoor classroom, very preliminary. I did mention that and included numbers into the budget, but this would be a project that the PTA would reimburse for. We may purchase any materials for them or services for them, and they will reimburse us. That's in the very early stages. They've just brought their idea to us, so we felt we should include. Glen Elementary, we're looking at, again, pavement repairs. We have some cracks developing in one of the playgrounds. The asphalt that's around it we want to fill so we can maintain it and conditions do not get worse. We're looking for the addition of a playground fence. Right now, the playground that's closest to the intersection of Limekiln and Fort Washington, there is a wall around it, but there's 2 large openings because of the pathway that students, and because of the proximity to 2 major roads, feel that this should be enclosed. It was something we would have sight through, so we wouldn't have any obscure vision, but it would be something that if a student were to make a run for the front or rear of the building towards the street, that it would slow them down so an aide can react. Also at Maple Glen, I increased the electric usage. If we are doing the air conditioning project this summer at Maple Glen, we will need to account for the additional cost in electricity that we will be using to operate. Thomas Fitzwater, again, common theme is some pavement repairs, all minor, but items that need to be taken care of before they do get worse. Thomas Fitzwater also needs fencing around the front playground. Not the same situation at Maple Glen, where the students would be running towards a busy street, but there is, with the early students, again, this is a kindergarten playground where a student can wander away quite easily towards a street or towards the swim club. So we'd like to see a fence around that playground as well. And the kindergarten, they're looking to change some of the rooms around at Thomas Fitzwater, and PTO has asked that we provide some better ventilation for the new rooms that they go into, possibly some better air conditioning units for that, and they have offered to help with assistance in those rooms. So we did allocate money that they would be reimbursing us for. Sandy Run Middle School, only one project that we're looking at that would take account for the budget. In room 403 was the old metal shop, and then there was also, because of the room's location, it became a partial IT room as well. When it was converted back to a classroom this year, the IT equipment and a lot of the welding equipment and fume hoods are in that room. We'd like to build a wall around there to isolate that area. There is a noise issue with some of the IT equipment and just the unsightliness of some of the welding equipment that we have gas lines in the area that are too difficult to remove at this point. Upper Dublin High School. We need to continue on every year we take a little bit of parking lot area, we do some restriping. 2 years ago we had a major project where we went through the entire district. All the street lines, the stop sign lines, and a lot of the parking lines are redone, with the exception of the actual parking lines and numbers here at the high school. We're getting to the point where we're not able to identify the parking lot lines or the numbers in some areas, so we are going to take a look at that. Some of the major projects that we're looking at also for the summer here are sidewalk repairs. We have some sidewalk and concrete that either salt has attacked or just premature failure of some of the concrete surface, and the township has identified these. Some of these were identified as part of the punch list on the closeout of the school. So we are being held by the township to make these repairs this year. The good portion about this, there is an escrow account that this money, as we make these repairs, the escrow account will release the money back to us. but we needed to put the money in the budget to make the initial repairs. And we're looking, that could be in the area of $50,000. But it would take care of all the areas. Anybody's been out in front of the PAC Center, how the concrete's falling in PAC, the other large area would be the sidewalk at Fort Washington and Lockash. There's some spalling around there, deterioration of the concrete that's not going to get better. So we're looking to take care of that. Pool. We always have work to do in the pool. It hasn't been drained or cleaned in 3 years, and we're due for it. We've identified some grouting areas where the grout has started to come out of the pool. Normal operations for a pool, completely expected. It's just time that we address that before it gets any worse. So this summer we're looking to, we're hoping to do it in the 2 weeks that we normally don't have any activities. We still need to verify that with the contractors, but we will drain, clean the pool completely, make any tile and grout repairs, and we're looking at replacing one of the diving board stands. The certain diving board stands, the 1 meter boards, really the protective surface is starting to corrode, and it's showing signs of age. The structure itself is safe, but it is deteriorating in conditions, and something we'd like to get, maybe do this in stages. These diving board stands are rather expensive, so if we space them out and do one every so many years, we can be on a program to keep them in good condition. And again, water conditioning operations, same as I explained for Fort Washington, will also be occurring here. And we already went through that slide.
So, questions or comments?
There we go. Thanks for the presentation. I have a couple questions, and I think they're probably relatively easier to answer. Just kind of go through one at a time. In terms of Fort Washington, you had mentioned and also the high school, you mentioned the licensed operator for DEP. Is that something that if an internal person were trained, could they obtain a license, or is this a truly separate?
This is a very special field. Somebody who does this all the time, has continuing education credits and insurance to keep up on this license. We're actually, currently our operator is employed by Pottstown. He's in charge of the Pottstown Water Department.
Okay.
So he has all the licensing and credentials, and he'll be out once a month. He's been making periodic stops now with us. We have the metering devices, and he's been working with us, and he'll be providing training and oversight for our staff, but I don't believe that we'd be able to train somebody to take care of this licensing.
Okay, great. Also, in terms of Thomas Fitz, you mentioned the kindergarten relocation and ventilation project. How much money would those units cost if the PTA wasn't offering to assist there?
Excuse me. We're identifying 2 rooms at this point, possibly more, and it depends. We can do grand scheme things. If we're just doing window units, it might only be, we would have to run electric from the new panels that we put in, then purchase the window units, have the window frames modified to accept them. Probably small scale, 2,000 to 3,000. If we decided to do the larger units, maybe such a wall-hung unit with a compressor put on the roof of the building, and the wall-hung units, you could be looking around $10,000.
I guess my only comment would be I have concerns about having a PTO spend on infrastructural type spending, but I think that comparison is very helpful. I think that's okay for now. Thank you.
Anyone else?
The mower, we purchased the mower a couple of years ago, a zero turn. So there's another second one?
We do have 2 zero turns. They have about a 5-year lifespan before they start to wear down. You have to make replacements. We do have some older units. Last year, we did purchase a large field mower that was $90,000. It gave us a 16-foot wide cut. We're looking at something that'll give us a 6-foot wide cut, but we can operate at a higher speed around the trees, and it's really the replacement of the aging units that we have now.
Okay, and the 2 baseball fields, do you know which fields we're
looking at the high school varsity and JV fields.
Okay.
This will be for the infield dirt. Last month, we had the contractor in. They did the 2 softball fields for us. Actually came out very well. What happens is you lose dirt over time between washout, just dirt getting kicked around, and the grass, the edge of the grass, between the grass and the dirt, gets a little high, and a sharply hit ball will ricochet off the grass edge.
Okay. The snow removal equipment, what kind of equipment is that?
We're looking at plows. We have our Kubota tractor right now. Somebody custom made, I'm not sure, with a garage or a shop, but they retrofitted a plow frame and a plow for our Kubota tractors. It does a nice job, but it's at the point now where it has more holes in it than it can push snow. So we're looking at upgrading to maybe something like, if you've noticed the township with their Kubota tractors, they have a large box to do parking lots and parking spaces, and now that'll help us clean out the corner parking spots easily.
Okay, thank you.
I was just trying to look at the various places where we have electricity costs. How much are you projecting electricity costs to increase? I mean, it looked like it. Maybe you're not.
I did for Maple Glen. I put an electric increase, roughly $20,000 in for Maple Glen.
But that's for the AC. So you're not really projecting increases in electricity costs overall?
No.
Okay.
Do you want to comment on that? We recently extended our contracts. Right now, utility rates are at the best they have been in a long time. There is the longer you can lock in, the better off you are right now. With the natural gas that's being in the state, it's keeping the electric costs down in this area as well. So we can lock in for a long rate, a steadier rate.
Of course, the really cold weather we had will have some impact on the volume, the amount that we use. But as far as the basic cost of electricity, we're part of the consortium,
okay.
We're locked, and we do the same thing with our natural gas.
Okay. And, maybe it's obvious, but for the benefit of the new board members, could you go through which water, my memory is that Fort Washington and the high school are on Ambler water,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's where we have the issues?
Yes, the district is served by 3 separate water authorities. Fort Washington and the high school are on Ambler water. We have North Wales Water Authority, takes care of the administration building at Maple Glen. And then Jarett Town, the middle school, and Thomas Fitzwater are serviced by Aqua, which is also some of the reason why the costs are different between the schools for the cost of water. Ambler water is much cheaper than compared to Aqua.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I guess, more questions. Mr. Ropsky.
Yeah, Bob, thanks for your presentation. I think you gave one for the firehouse. Did you give the presentations at the firehouse for the township? No?
No? Not
All
for
right.
here. In Springfield,
Wait.
I did, though.
All right. But anyway, again, for the snow removal equipment, is that snow plows or?
We're looking at snow plows, snow blowers. We're trying to keep on a rotation for our older snow plows. Some of the schools don't quite have enough. And also at Maple Glen and the middle school, areas that have larger sidewalk, that we actually have old Hustler lawnmowers that were converted for a plow attachment. And so they don't function as lawn cutting equipment anymore, but they've been repurposed as
For the
snow equipment.
sidewalks and
for,
stuff,
For
yeah.
plowing the sidewalks. And
Yeah.
we're keeping them up running for the amount of hours that we need them for. We're not looking to replace them, but if we can, with in-kind equipment, but if we can place those with larger snow blowers, we'll do that.
But for plows, you have trucks with plows,
Yes,
pickups?
yes, we have 2 dump trucks, then we have our fleet of pickup trucks. We also have 2 Kubota tractors. One will keep the bucket on to assist with any salt removal, and the other one will put a plow on.
Okay, great. On the sidewalks, for the sidewalk replacements, I know that with the Spalding and everything and the amount of salt that we put on the sidewalks, have you thought about using magnesium or, I think calcium is still pretty bad, but urea or magnesium for, especially on the new sidewalks that are less than a year old? Because once it starts getting over a year old, then it kind of can take the salt, but anything less than a year?
I'm not sure what previous purchases have been. When I did arrive at the district, we were using a lot of calcium.
Yeah.
This year, we did buy a magnesium product.
Yeah, magnesium. And it
talked
doesn't eat the grass either, it doesn't kill the
I
grass.
talked with Andy Mess, and we both agreed. The
Yeah.
magnesium, it is better to use. And a lot of people don't realize the calcium, especially with the terrazzo floors or
Yeah.
the resilient floors that we have in a school, the calcium will leave a residue, and those floors become very slippery.
Yeah.
So we have switched over to a magnesium product.
And
for
then,
the
of course,
sidewalks.
sealing the new concrete after it's poured, sealing it with a sealer, right?
We'll take a look at that.
I
Some
know
have
Township
sealers.
required that whenever flat work was done.
Yes, and we'll look at what their specifications are for concrete as well.
Are you aware of their bids when they do a township-wide bid? Could it be competitive with whoever contractor we get to do our sidewalks or no?
I expect our pricing to be in line
Okay.
with what the township's pricing is. It is a large enough project. We will be paying prevailing wage. Last summer, we did do smaller areas of the building, so we were able to do them under the prevailing wage requirements. So we did have a better price in the township. But any work the township is doing will be prevailing wage. And I anticipate this project for the summer at the high school will be well above the prevailing wage requirements.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes.
If there are no other questions, thank you very much. Oh, wait.
They were checking about the electricity.
Okay.
Let me just see.
Oh,
You know what? This one doesn't have it. Never. Because on the other one I had filters where we could just pull up.
We're still learning how to work with sheets, and what Jen was able to do, and I followed along on mine, when you ask about electricity, she was able to fold up
Oh,
all
really?
the lines that related to electricity, and it gave you a total. So I was hoping that we
Yeah,
could
it
figure
doesn't
out
show the
how to do
filter.
that again, so that we can make our budget discussions in areas such as this, where we have, electricity under 6 different account codes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That one doesn't want to do it, so I apologize for,
You usually you can do it in sheets? Ah, okay.
I don't see, you don't have any filters on it. Oh, okay.
on the shore, when everybody's in it, you could see it, but it wouldn't come through for the public presentation. So we'll continue to explore how we can better communicate and manipulate our spreadsheets for public consumption.
Okay. Thank you very much. I guess I would make one request for future presentations. You gave a lot of the details in the slides. You said what the numbers were, what the cost of each of the items were, but it would be helpful to have that actually on the slides if you have it available when you're making the
I
presentations.
can absolutely do that, yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Okay, are there any announcements or communications?
None this evening?
And we do have minutes from December, so the same comments as always. If you see any corrections, give them to Mrs. Bruck. Now we get down to 3 items in our Finance Committee reports and recommendations, and the first is the Plan Con J Upper Dublin, from the Upper Dublin High School project.
So as we finalize and put to bed, so to speak, the high school project financially, except for refundings, which we will have more of those as time moves on, assuming interest rates don't increase. But PlaneCon J is a particular form that has to be submitted to PDE. We can certainly go up and open it if you would like, but I think everyone has a copy of it. And it has to be, the information has to be aggregated and submitted in a specific form. We have 17 bankers boxes of documents that support the building of the high school. And from those records, many very large Excel spreadsheets, not sheets, were put together so that we could combine the information in the manner in which it needed to be presented. Approximately, I imagine 9 months ago, the board approved a gentleman who specializes in doing PlaneCon audits across the Commonwealth. There's not that many firms, not that many individuals, and he came into the district and spent one day physically ticking and tracing a lot of the numbers after having done a great deal of work electronically. It's certainly a different way to work. Once he had the form filled out and all the numbers totaled and categorized, then we needed to have an independent audit or have it reviewed by independent auditors. We costed that out with a firm that would have to have driven in, I think, from State College. Again, not a lot of firms do this other than the firms that work with each district. And based on the costs, we chose to have our independent auditors who've actually audited all of those expenditures through the years. Bond refundings, bond acquisition and everything come in, and so you will also see their PlaneCon report. And it's a little dressier than the one that is absolutely required. Next steps. This would go to the February 12th meeting. It would be approved. Then it must be submitted to PlaneCon for their approval. And you may wonder why we would do all of this. For years, we've been receiving PlaneCon reimbursement for a very small percentage of the amount of money that we pay on debt, a very small percentage. But we've been receiving what's referred to as a temporary reimbursement. Once PlaneCon is filed, accepted, and signed off, it will move to what's called a permanent percentage, and then we will be finished with it. And usually there's a slight adjustment upward. So we'll receive a little bit of additional money once that's all calculated. So that's an explanation for the PlaneCon submission that you're seeing tonight.
Any comments or questions? Okay, I mean, again, for new board members, the PlaneCon process, I mean, it goes A, B, C, D. That's how we get to J. There's things that you have to fill out all along the way to get the reimbursements.
And actually, PlaneCon K, there is a PlaneCon K, which you're all more familiar with because we borrowed money, I believe, in 5 tranches for the high school. And so each one of those borrowings needed to have a K, and if there's been any refundings, there have been subsequent Ks, PlaneCon Ks filed. So.
If there are no questions on that, we'll move that on to the legislative meeting. Okay, the next item is the high school marching band uniforms.
At the legislative meeting that we had last Thursday evening, we actually were able to see one of our students. I don't know that you were there yet, Dr. Lugwood.
I wasn't, but I did watch it. I looked at it on the video.
Okay.
I couldn't see all the decorations they were talking about, but I got the idea.
Anyway, we need to be moving forward with that in order to have our the uniforms completed in time when the students come back and start their competitions in August. It's approximately $70,000, as we discussed, for 110 uniforms. It also includes a banner, which I understand Mr. Horn told me they had not replaced the marching cardinals or whatever it is they carry between them since a really long time ago, such as I was in high school. So I was like, okay, it may cost $1,000, but it's probably time to replace it.
So yeah, I had to look at the video, but he did say that it's a 10-year cycle for the uniforms.
Thank you for confirming that.
Are there any questions, or did
I will go ahead and make sure that there aren't many firms in the United States that actually make marching band uniforms, but I do want our solicitor just to take a quick look at it. I've already taken a quick look to make sure of some of the legal terms I know that they'll want. And then I'll probably go ahead and sign the contract and have ratification on February 12th to keep Mr. Horn calm. It's the best way of saying it.
Okay. So we'll move that forward.
And again, it is an expenditure for 1819.
All right. Our next item is going over the revenue budget for 1819. And I get this is really the first of our budget reviews. So we usually do the revenue budget, and then we do the expenditure budget in a couple parts. So
We have not yet figured out how to combine the summary pages for each one of the levels, the 6,000s, 7,000s, 8,000s, and 9,000s. So what I have jumped to is what always interests me the most. That would be, they are in the packet. I could go. Oh, here they are. I am so sorry. I can pull it up. No, don't worry about it. Thank you. So we have descriptors talking about the various types of revenue. 6,000s, anything that begins with the number 6,000, is considered to be local revenues. Some interesting statistics. Local revenue in Upper Dublin represents 81% of the district's total revenues. That number is very, very different depending upon what district you're in. There's even a fair variance in the southeastern part of the Commonwealth. But when you move further west in the middle part of the state, you may find as much as 60 or 70% would be from state resources. And another interesting fact is the real estate taxes account for 89% of the local revenues. And we've talked about Act 1 more than what we often do because of the passage of the resolution again this year, and which we've done. It clearly states in here that there are special ed expenditures and retirement contributions. We did not qualify for a special ed expenditure. That means that our costs from one year to the next did not exceed or go up enough to justify applying for the expenditure or for an exception, and we do qualify for PESERS, which is the retirement, but it's only based on our best estimates of $15,199. So, and as was stated, January 11th, the board approved the opt-out resolution for 1819. State revenues. Grants, subsidies, contracts, entitlements received from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. If they pass their budget on a timely basis. This revenue includes basic instructional and operational subsidies, basic ed, special education, specific educational program subsidies, and employee benefit. Just for everyone in the room, 50% of our expenditures for PESERS and for FICA are reimbursed by the Commonwealth. And only in governmental accounting would you take a reimbursement and call it revenue, but that's exactly what happens. State revenues account for 18% of total district revenues. The employee benefit payments included our Social Security. I've already spoke about that. What's interesting, and I just for the more experienced, but yes, information you should all might want to know, 18% is the amount that we say comes from the state, but about 2.4 million of that property tax allocation is fairly new. And so just a few years ago, if you were to subtract 2.4 million away from your state and flip it over to your, your local, those percentages changed quite a bit when property tax allocation came into being. Federal revenues, Title I, all of the titles, funds, it's 0.5, 0.5% in Upper Dublin, and actually it's an increase. We do have more money budgeted coming in than what we've had in past years. IDEA, which is budgeted for $500,000, is a federal revenue, but since it's passed through the Commonwealth to MCIU, it's considered to be, it has to be coded to our local revenue. So there's $500,000 that really comes from the feds, but since it passes through our state, it becomes local revenue. And lastly, account $9,000. It's other financing sources because the receipts are not really earned by the district. They're not earned. We have money coming in, and really all of this relates to our Chromebooks lease primarily. Could be from other funds, and if we had any sale of fixed assets, we would account for it here, but that would be a minor amount. So if we could then jump back to the numbers. Looking at the total revenue, we are budgeted to hit $100 million this year, with local revenue being $81,589,000. Again, the state revenue around $18 million. Federal revenue, $459,000, and you can see the chart that's included on the page to graphically detail the information. Moving on to the detail, our current real estate taxes for next year. This is very important. That number of $72,107,000 includes a tax increase at this point in time of 2.4%. That may very well change. But at this point, that is what it is. Interim real estate taxes, because as we've discussed at various meetings, we have construction going on in Upper Dublin, the Regency, and some other areas. We're expecting $250,000 of interim real estate taxes probably to come in this year as well as next year. Public realty taxes, it's called PERDA. It's just really on some utilities. It's a form that needs to be filled out, not much of a change. But payment in lieu of current taxes. You'll notice that that amount really jumped this year to $74,500. That is related to the Madison Estates and the status of where that property is under development. And next year, based on the contract that was signed with the developer, that amount should be $150,000. Note, after next year, that amount will essentially go back down to next to nothing. Earned income tax, right now we have budgeted a slight increase for the current year as well as next. An email has gone to Berkheimer to help us work on a more sophisticated or see where they think we'll land. Those numbers will change. Again, the board knows that number usually changes several times. Real estate transfer tax. It's really hard to predict. We've had some change in properties. Every time something sells, whether it's one of the homes in our school district or one of the properties down in the Fort Washington Office Park or along Welsh Road, we receive some money, 0.5%. on that particular transaction. Over the last 3 years, that has generated a lot of what I will refer to always as one-time money. Those transactions change from year to year, and that is what we have built a lot of the capital put aside for capital projects, and how the debt service fund was also started. Delinquent real estate taxes. What's happened here is our lien list is dropped again, which is good. It means that we have more money that's coming in on the first line, on the current real estate tax, on 6111, versus coming in later on in the 6411 account. Last year it was around $850,000, if I remember correctly. This year it's approximately $650,000. So that $200,000 less in that particular area. Interest on investments. Well, we know what interest rates have finally done, so our interest yield on the investment of idle earnings has increased as well. Those are really the major, I think, items to hit in the local revenue as far as major changes. I will, come on. Tuition, do want to call your attention to tuition from other LEAs, particularly HFVA, as we titled that. That was related to the villa, and since it is no longer operating, you will note that those amounts have zeroed out for the current year and the next year. We actually had budgeted for some receipts this year, but we were fortunate in the fact that we were able to settle really everything last year before the end of June 30th of 2017. Pool rental, UDAC reimbursements, we pay for people that work in the pool, salaries, the appropriate FICA, and then UDAC reimburses us. So that's not really a revenue item, but it is an offsetting item. So again, local revenue, about $81.5 million. And I probably should have used the next page or directed you to go to the next page, because each one of the items on the detail provides a description. I don't know that I necessarily need a description. I like to look at the numbers straight across. So when we get to the $7,000 detail, we'll do that. But again, there's more information, narrative, describing each one of the items. Looking at the 7,000 detail, haven't really heard anything yet. Usually that'll come out in February after the governor gives us the first look at the budget for their budget. So we're just estimating our basic ed subsidy and our special ed subsidy, what we've been told so far, and just carrying that forward to next year. That will change, hopefully in an optimistic, positive fashion. Transportation subsidy, I did speak of that earlier in the operations committee. Again, about $400,000, or in this case, $500,000. Darn it. Why are we misbehaving? Rental and sinking fund payments. Which is another thing. PlanCon reimbursement, we talked about that with PlanCon J. Not a great deal of money for Upper Dublin, but nevertheless, we want it. And since PlanCon did sell bonds, we're expecting that money to be coming in very soon. Health services, that's revenue received from the state for certain health service expenses that we have to incur. We're required to have nursing services, and occasionally we have other expenditures that we have to pay. And there is a detailed form that needs to be filled out that no one really likes, because it tells exactly how many visits to the nurse's office and how many eye exams were done, and all the things that are required by PDE. And it takes several people working on it to get it figured out. And right now, I will tell you 7810, I need to mention Ready to Learn block grant. It appears that that will be carried forward, approximately $142,000. Haven't heard of any reason so far to cut that. So that's a positive. State share of Social Security and Medicare taxes. We really have not, we're not nearly finished with personnel and salaries, and until that is done, these numbers can't be even finalized. So please know that 7810 and 7820 will change as the budget process continues. So $18 million, again, for state funds. Title funds, improving basic programs, and you'll notice that that amount on Title I has really gone up quite a bit for next year based on our budget. And we did not find out about that change last year. In fact, if you remember when we were analyzing the end of 2016-17, that it was unusual, but between access and title, we actually had a positive variance of about $250,000, and that's very, very rare. Title II, down from this year's budget, but that's just because we didn't have the best information that we could have wished for when we were putting together last year's budget. We've had some issues with personnel, or I shouldn't say it that way, but we had some of the people that we need to work with on title funding have been difficult to reach. They've been short-staffed, and there's been some personnel matters, so trying to find information last year was a little more difficult. Medical assistance. So, well, it's a very small piece of our budget. It has increased. And the the 9,000 detail proceeds from external funding. Again, this is really just having to do with Chromebooks. That number is generated really after the audit or during the audit when we are looking at all the payments and the interest rates. But please know that, like several other revenue items, there's going to be an offsetting expense. So when this entry is booked, it's booked on revenue and as well as expenditure to the appropriate account numbers. Therefore, it has a zero-sum effect on our bottom line. And the last chart is really just looking at comparing the Act 1 index and tax increases dating back. How far, Jen?
12, 13.
Thank you. I couldn't see it on here without skating too far. And this year, right now, again, it's 2.4 to 2.4 as far as the tax increase and the Act 1 index, one and the same, but we certainly do expect that to change. Questions?
I have one question.
Sure.
That might be helpful again to other people. Are all the numbers in here based on the assumptions that we went over earlier in the fall, or have you made any revisions to any of those things? Things like, the increase in the assessed value, or what we expect for increases in earned income, or any of those things?
As far as assessed value, what we have done is taken what the actual assessed value was as of January 1st.
Oh, so we're using actual. We're not using
when we can.
Those projections that we talked about.
Right.
And can you remind me which month we talked about those? Because then people can find it.
I think that was in November. Was November? Yes, it was November.
Okay.
Just a follow-up question. I'm not sure if there's a place to find this information, and that's just me being new. We talk a lot about the different developments and projects that are out in the township. I'm having a hard time keeping track of them. I don't know necessarily where they're all located. Is there a way to track that, put it on a spreadsheet? Put them on, oh, you do? Just because I need to familiarize myself with the names and the timeline for those projects. So just a selfish request.
No, it's not. And actually, I think the township has. I think the township has something with a map with a number of units. I can visualize it. I don't know if I can put my hands on it immediately in my office, but yes.
It may be on my desk.
Okay. we can provide something along that. Now,
Great.
what is more difficult and what sometimes Dr. Levinowitz and I get into jockeying about, we know that the Regency's supposed to produce 105 homes. I tend to look at those and count those as being in the fold when they've sold and they're on the rolls. And, they've started to generate the interim billings. And I think we're close to 40. Yeah, but he knows how many are under contract, but it doesn't matter if they're under contract until they've sold. So, well, yes, they absolutely have to sold. They have to be recorded because once the transfer tax hits, then they're recorded on our assessment list, and then I'm really good with them because it's there and I can count on it, and you can too. And we're starting to see some properties sell and be recorded in Washington Manor as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone have other questions? Go ahead, Stan.
Yeah, Brenda, I'm a little shocked that the earned income tax revenues haven't gone up. And actually, it's gone down from 2016, 2017. Your estimate, from 5,313,000 to 5,250,000. Is there any reason why? Do you think? Your thoughts?
What I'm seeing 5.2 million, 5.25, and 5.25.
Well, it says revenue for 2016. Okay, 5,313,000,
Oh,
and then it goes down to 5,250,000.
Again, there are spikes in EIT, and that wouldn't be much of a spike. That wouldn't be much of a variance based on year to year. And so
Yeah, you would think it would go up like maybe 1 or 2%, based on inflation and, people getting pay raises.
it often does, but there's been years that it has not done that. And I did indicate earlier that I've contacted Berkheimer to take a look at that amount of money.
Let me just say, this is January. I guarantee you that number will change.
Yes.
When we look at it again in April, May, it will. I agree. I know what you're saying, but that's just an estimate right now in January. I think we're counting on that number to go up based on some of the things that we're looking to do in the next 6 months with our tax increase. So we're looking to offset it with some other items, and I think I agree. If there's people moving in, you wonder how many people are moving into the Regency that are still working. That's something. And over at the Washington Manor, they're slowly moving into that development. That will definitely help us with our earned income tax.
Yeah, as long as they don't work in the city.
There you go.
And that's the problem too.
Yeah.
That's the problem too.
And EIT does not come in on an even basis. So there are certain times in January we may be receiving more money because of the filings for the quarterly filings. So there are a number of reasons, but everyone here will tell you that number typically goes up, maybe by $100,000, but on a budget of $100 million, that's not that significant. Where I really want to watch, and I want everyone else to pay close attention to as the year rolls by, our transfer tax. That has been, I don't want to say volatile because it's based on economic activity, but it's very difficult to predict. And we have individual spreadsheets. Jen monitors this on a monthly basis, and we try to calculate the averages over the last few years in coming up in an amount. We don't just rely on what's happened last year and say, well, if we got 5.3 million, we're going to budget that for next year because things do change. And Jen, did you? Go ahead.
As of now, July through December, we've collected $2.3 million, roughly.
Wow.
So, it's heavy because of April. Another point to be watching as far as our local detail. If you went to do it on a percentage basis, much smaller amount, but is the investment income. I've received some teasing comments about, wow, I was really off on that, and particularly by a percentage. But I hadn't planned on us being able to, that the interest rates would tick up quite enough. And you may recall that the board last Thursday night approved us using another financial institution. So when we have some time, we'll be comparing, some investments that are Act 72, of course, compliant, with trying to maximize that amount maybe by another $25,000 or so.
I think one thing I'll mention, probably at many of the board meetings to come, is the lack of support at the state level that Mr. Osprey has mentioned earlier. 47th in the country in terms of support. But even if you look at that support, the state will say that they increase the amount that they give to districts. They do, but if you look at the money, the additional money that they give us because of FICA and pension,
Right.
it more than offsets the additional, the minimal difference that they give us in the basic education subsidy and special education. When you think about what our costs are to fund the district, and then you look at our basic ed subsidy from the state is $2.9 million, and that has not gone up significantly. We were excited when it went up $50,000. So that is, and special education, how much the costs of special education continue to, continue. We're proud of the work that we do in special education. The state gives us $1.8 million to support special education.
Which
So
is
everything,
less than last
everything
year.
everything is local. When you look at the fair funding formula that I'm sure the new board members are getting familiar with, which has been approved, that applies only to new monies. The additional money that goes to the basic education funding. Not only that is a surprising fact that we realize is if you look at if they converted all the funds that go to basic education funding, converted using the new formula, you would say, oh no, we're going to probably get less. But in fact, we get 50% more if they converted all of the state money to the new formula. Because right now, the formula, only anything that's extra, you have to use the new basic education formula. And that was intentionally, that was the law that was passed. If they would say, okay, all of the money next year is going to be calculated based on the new basic education formula, we'd be getting about approximately 50% more. So it's not, we wouldn't suffer from that formula, which a lot of people are surprised about. And special ed is just amazing what they fund for special ed. But when the state keeps saying they give us more and more money every year, well, part of that money, all of that, more than all of it, is because of the pension and the FICA. And then something that people don't even know about is the property tax reduction that everybody forgets about. That is on your tax bill every year, $320 is subtracted from your tax bill every month because of that. And it's kind of an offset. You're not paying it, but the state is giving that money, is sending that money to all the districts. The scary thought is, what if that ever goes away? It's commonly referred to as the gambling. It's all the casino. It's all the gaming money. It's all the gaming money that it's in the state. We get approximately $2.5 million for that, and you can see it's been basically flat over time
Since the inception.
And again, that's one of the monies that they say they give to us. It's money that they collect for gambling, and then offset minimally property taxes, at the local level. So I'll try to remind everyone from time to time about the lack of state support, and it's just terrible.
Mr. Robsky, I think you noted that the amount that we have budgeted for special education is less than what we received last year. there is extraordinary revenue piece that you can apply for. The school district has to file certain paperwork, and last year we received over $100,000 in that. But I wouldn't be prudent of me to just assume that we're going to receive the same amount of money, because that pot is awarded. The allocations are made on the number of school districts, and it's not a given that we're going to receive that money. Now, when we do find out, which usually is February or March, then we'll make an adjustment in our budget. But right now, the conservative way is just to include what we know we're going to receive. Mm-hmm.
What was that included in Mrs. Clegg's pupil services presentation? I can't remember.
She did talk about it, but
All right.
Obviously her presentation is only expenditures. So,
Okay.
But she did give more detail. You're absolutely correct.
Any other questions or comments? TC.
Brenda, the UDEC reimbursements in 15-16 were 203, and then in 16-17, 135. Now on 150. What's the fluctuation in that?
We're not always sure as to in the business office, because it's based on what actually happens. Jen, do you have any specific comments that you could make about? Okay, so we can look it up.
There could have also been some additional equipment that was purchased at that time, and they were reimbursing us for
Or
it. So
helping
we
us
have-
share the cost.
Yeah, so it's
It could be that.
It's hard.
When they hire more people and they do receive an increase in salary, then our reimbursement is increased as well. Good question. As we get into the budget process or closer to the end of the year, we sometimes look more at making sure that our budget is in line with what is actually being expended.
It also can just depend on the billing too, of whenever we get because it's done quarterly. So whenever we get the bills out and when they pay us, it could change that way, but I can look at it.
Anyone else?
Anything else on revenues?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the report items on the agenda. We're ready for community input if anyone would like to speak.
Roland Lynn, Fort Washington area. With regard to just a comment on the Pennsylvania state not doing its fair share. I have a yes and a no, a yay and an amen for some of that, but I also have a comment that I don't think you're seeing exactly with the comments that you made may be relevant, but I don't think that they're complete. They're necessary but not sufficient. My daughter and son-in-law live in Texas. They came from Upper Dublin, graduates of Upper Dublin High School. They now live in Texas, in a suburb of Dallas. There, the state pays for everything. Local taxes are very minimal and don't really have any impact on the actual major functions. So they're exactly the opposite of here in Pennsylvania. Is the education as good? Is it a quality of an education as good here in Pennsylvania, or particularly in Upper Dublin? The answer probably is no. Probably we do have a better education, but is that because of the people? Is that because of the clientele? Is it demography? But one thing's for sure. Whenever consolidation of school districts comes up in Pennsylvania, you can bet that the people are going to fight it, and Upper Dublin will be the first ones that will be standing out there with torches and pitchforks saying no consolidation with any other school district in the area. So if you want to lower the cost, you can do it very easily. You can do what Texas does. You can consolidate the school districts. A lot of transportation issues, but nevertheless, they do it, and there's less cost. So please, don't just blame the state of Pennsylvania for not doing its job, and don't blame the politicians. Politicians got enough blame, and I agree with you that there's, I'm certainly glad that my son didn't go into politics. But nevertheless, I think that it's not just a matter of the state not doing its job. And second thing and the last thing, I just want to thank Dr. Levenwitz for giving a précis on how the district works, seeing as how the new school board members, in my 40 and 50 years coming to school board meetings, I rarely see any of them or have seen any of them. So it was nice to hear how you educated them on how the school district works. It was a nice précis. Thank you.
Anita Brister, Fort Washington. I want to refer back to what I brought up at the last meeting. More specifically, I guess I need to ask the question because I didn't get a response. Does the district have a copy of the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit chart that does a comparison of data across all budget categories? And did you present it already? Did I miss it? Okay, so I could at least request it, though, and get it since the district has it?
We can tell you where it was. Yeah.
But it was presented at a meeting? Okay. Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Well, you can tell me when it was presented, but I would just like the link or to get a copy of it. So then unless you've got it, I don't know if you have it with you, but the one I'm most interested in tonight, because there's many categories, as you know, in there, is where do we stand with the debt? Are when we compare to similar districts or compare to all of Montgomery County, if you want to, where are we? I'm going to guess, if I had to guess, that Lower Merion's higher than us, but are we second with debt? I mean, now, if you don't have it with you, it's okay. I can wait until I get a copy. But I think it's important to know where we stand with some of these budget categories. Are we, close to other districts like Wissahickon, Hatboro, Horsham, or are we way above, or are we way below? And this is a category, for an example, where you want to be below. You don't want to be top in debt. And at least I certainly don't want to be. So if you don't have the answers tonight, then I guess I'll try to get the answer when I see the chart myself. Another question that's not, this isn't specifically related to that, but again, it's something you can get from the IU. And if you don't have it tonight, I think you could get it. What's the average superintendent salary in Montgomery County? And this may seem off the topic, but it's a budget meeting, and we could ask anything at any meeting, but when does the current teacher's contract expire? That's like actually the biggest part of the budget is the salaries and the pension. Does it expire this June or later? I've lost track. I know there was an extension on the other contract. But anyway, those are my 3 questions for now.
Okay. Seeing that everyone in the community has asked their questions, we'll close community input and answer what we can. So with regard to Mr. Lynn's comment about consolidation of districts, I'm definitely not an expert. I've read a few studies that show that it does not really save a lot of money. I could find them and send them to you. I mean, that's, I guess, does anybody else have any comments about that, or? Yeah.
Based on experience, I grew up in Collingdale. I went to Collingdale High School, and we had our own identity. Collingdale had its own high school, its own parks, its own everything. I walked to school every day. When they merged 3 school districts into one school district, they called it Southeast Elko. Collingdale lost its identity. People did not move back into the community because it wasn't Collingdale anymore. It was Southeast Elko. So I I'm not for consolidating, schools to save, perhaps maybe save money. That's one thing Upper Dublin brings to the table that Wissahickon doesn't have. Upper Dublin has its own identity, its own high school, its own municipality. Wissahickon, you go to Wissahickon High School, where do you live? Oh, Ambler. Oh, okay. Or what if you live in Whitpain? You go to Wissahickon. So it's like they don't have their own high school. So that's what Upper Dublin brings to the table.
I have to amend what I said before. I think in those studies, it did show that very small districts could benefit from consolidation, but only the very small districts. And there are other things that you can benefit from, shared services and doing things as a consortium, and many of those are done through the IUs or other consortiums like the healthcare consortiums. So in some ways, again, now I'm speaking opinion, not what I read in reports, you get the best of both. You maintain the access you have to administration and the board in a small community by having independent school districts, and you benefit from the economic shared services by collaborating and going through the intermediate unit and having those services that it's really too expensive for an individual district to do at the intermediate unit level. And I will try to find those studies to send to you. We discussed the MCIU chart. Do you have that?
Right now, we're attempting to look for it. I know we did the presentation, but I'm not finding what month we presented it. It was much later than usual this year because the IU lost, there were 2 key retirements that usually pulled this information together, and it did not arrive until the summer. Again, I know Ms. Baldessano and I did the presentation, as in constructed it. Oh. Okay, she found it. November 16th is when we did it, so.
Do you have access to it? Can you answer the question on debt? I know. All right, we don't have that available right now. But if you go to the agendas, go to the calendar, the district calendar, and go to the agendas, you'll be able to go through that particular meeting through board docs and pull up the presentation.
November 16th.
Yes. I don't know that. I think Mr. Sigafus might have the numbers for average superintendent salary, but I don't think anyone here has them. So if you want to ask at a legislative meeting when he's present. And then the teacher's contract is 2019, so summer of 2019. Not this summer, but the following summer. Oops, I'm looking at an old meeting. So that concludes our meeting. The next Finance Committee meeting will be Thursday, February 15th, 7 p.m. Immediately following the Operations Committee. We assume it's approximately 7 p.m. And it will be here in the Cardinal Room. Thank you very much. Good night.